So, hi everyone. My name is Anurag Kumar. I am founder of Prec Studio. So, Prec Studio is a generative AI studio where we help individuals and companies to leverage the power of generative AI like ChatGPT and Midjourney to boost their efficiency and build new products and enhance the products that they already have and build knowledge management solutions. Uh, so this session is more about giving an overview of what this technology can do and what are the best ways to leverage it. We'll also discuss like what are few of the shortcomings of this technology and what are the ways to go around it, get around it. So I have broadly divided the session in three parts. In the first part, we are going to discuss the fundamentals of what is ChatGPT, how do you get started, the basic stuffs, right? And what are few things to keep in mind. Because if you have used it, you would have realized there are certain limitations to it. And this is quite different from the other applications that we have used so far. Then we'll dive into a few key concepts, like what are the large language models, at least an overview of it. How is ChatGPT able to do what it is able to do, right? How is it able to create content? How is it able to answer so many questions? Is it connected to the internet and all of those nuanced questions? What are few of the use cases that we see in the market? And at the end of the session, I also want to showcase few of the experiments that I am doing with ChatGPT right now and what are some of the best practices which for prompt engineering and for using ChatGPT, which gives very good results. And I also want to talk about Playgrounds. So Playgrounds is not really ChatGPT, but it uses the same models and the same backend as ChatGPT, and it is much more powerful than what ChatGPT can do. It is not free, but when we create an account with ChatGPT, all of us get $15 of few credits, which we can use to which we can use on the playground and see how the model behaves for when we change different parameters. Uh, what we'll not cover in this session is the ChatGPT Plus and all of the features that come along with it. For example, we'll not cover ChatGPT plugins. And we'll also not cover custom instructions. So custom instructions was a feature that ChatGPT launched around 2 or 3 days back, but there's a lot of conflicting information about it. Personally, I did not get this feature in my app, and there are some news articles which say that this was rolled back. So I'm not really sure what exactly is happening with custom instructions. But there is a similar feature to custom instructions in Playground that we will talk about. And we'll also not talk about GPT-4 because fundamentally GPT-4 is an advanced version of GPT-3, which is what powers the free version of ChatGPT. Only thing is it can do certain things better, and most of the things at a fundamental level remain the same. So let's get started with it, right? So how I like to think about ChatGPT is basically it's an assistant to augment your thoughts and ideas. It is always good to have someone with whom you can bounce off ideas, right? And generally and we have too many ideas in a day. So it is good to have an assistant on which we can store these ideas, and the assistant can respond to these ideas. And at many times, it can even give us the next steps on how to make these ideas a reality, right? And that is how I like to think of ChatGPT, and that is generally the premise that I take in this presentation. Um, so to give an overview of ChatGPT, so ChatGPT is basically a neural network model. So Chat stands for the interface that it provides. Basically, you can talk to a machine in a very chat-like interface like WhatsApp. And GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformers. Generative because it can create original content based on what it has learned and what it has trained on. Why generative? Can they be other kind of models? Of course, they could be like probabilistic models. They could be predictive models. But it is generative because it creates original content. It is called pre-trained because it is already trained on like millions and millions of documents, and it is fine-tuned for chatting. So for the best results, the best way to use this application is as a chat interface. And this is not the first pre-trained AI that we have used, right? So if you see the Google Assistant or Siri that comes on our phone, the very first thing it asks us to do is basically utter a few phrases, and it tries to understand that, how you pronounce particular words. If it was a completely untrained model, it would have asked us to like give a lot of voiceovers and a lot of training for it to understand what we're talking about. But these models are pre-trained, and once we do those few utterance, what happens? It gets fine-tuned. So in case of ChatGPT, all this thing is already done, and it is pre-trained specifically for chatting purposes. And Transform is basically a neural network architecture, which the ChatGPT uses in the backend. And Transformers is what has made the Transformer architecture is what has made ChatGPT possible. So to talk about Transformers, Transformers was actually introduced to the world by Google Brains, which is a team in Google. And I find it quite fascinating that, that Google had such a huge invention, like basically an invention that they had done, which had the capability of revolutionizing the entire world. And they had not leveraged on it for so many years. And OpenAI has beaten them at their own game. I feel like it is somewhat similar to how Kodak invented the digital cameras, but they were so much into the films and the analog cameras that they never capitalized on it. And now Kodak is nowhere in the photography market. So attention is all you need is the paper that introduced the transformer architecture. Frankly speaking, even I don't understand the technology aspects of transformers so much. But this particular architecture for neural network is what made it happen. And basically, this has made it so seamless that we can talk to a very large language model like GPT in real time, right? And just give me a second. And that is where all the power lies. And this is the thing which is powering all the models, which are powering the ChatGPT. So some basic stuff. I hope you already have a ChatGPT account, but if you don't, then I would suggest you go and create one, because most of the links that I'm going to be sharing, and if you want to leverage it, you will need a ChatGPT account. Otherwise, you will not be able to access even the material that I'll share with you. And to create a ChatGPT account, all you need is an email ID and a phone number. You can go to chat.openai.com and create an account for account in like a few steps, right? But before we even begin with using the ChatGPT, or even I show you the interface and what we can do with it, there are a few things that we should keep in mind, right? ChatGPT is still in research preview, which basically is OpenAI's way of saying that, hey, if you use it for some purpose and it doesn't work out, it's not their responsibility, right? Second thing is it is optimized for chat, like we had already discussed. And sometimes you can corner ChatGPT in a way that it starts producing incorrect and misleading information. So if you're publishing the information that you have used, that you have created using ChatGPT, it is always a good idea to make sure that you have reviewed the content rather than sharing it directly. And sometimes it can produce offensive and biased content. And by bias, I mean it's like a human construct, right? If you think about the data that is used on training ChatGPT, it is basically come from internet and books. And humans by nature are biased, and there will be certain content which will dominate the internet, and about the other things there will be very little content. And if you put all that content in a machine, that machine also tend to have bias. And OpenAI is working hard to make this problem go away, but this is actually quite a big problem in AI industry as such right now. And this can put like some specific use cases in trouble, right? And another problem that OpenAI has, and it is termed as hallucination, in which it can give us a very confident response, and the response is going to be wrong. And even if you keep asking ChatGPT, right, hey, you told this, is this correct? And it'll say very confidently, I'm sure that this is how the things work and things like that. And these happen in certain cases. The chance of this happening are like, I would say less than 10%, but still we need to be aware that this is one of the major flaws of a neural network based architecture and an app like ChatGPT. Another thing which is in the news a lot is that, hey, the limit, it has a knowledge cutoff date of 2021. If we can think of it as a limit, but I think if we are using ChatGPT as a source of gathering knowledge, which is like recent, then I think that is not the way to use ChatGPT. The use cases for ChatGPT are like far and wide, and there are things it can do with its limited knowledge, which were not possible before. And it should not be ideally used as a knowledge, as the only source of knowledge gathering system, right? And then obviously manually review everything that you're creating on ChatGPT. And one of the things that OpenAI is very clear about, especially if you have a developer account on OpenAI, is that if you are creating any content or any application using ChatGPT, the credit and the copyright for that content goes to you. You cannot say, you cannot cite source as ChatGPT. That is something which is against the policies of OpenAI. And they say we cannot take responsibility of any content that you create. Whatever content is being created is your responsibility, and you have to make sure that it is accurate, it is unbiased, and that whatever purposes you're using it for, those are all legal and valid. So let's start looking at the chat GPT interface. So I'll just dive in. So when we log into ChatGPT, this is pretty obvious. This is the screen that we see. So here they give us a few examples on like what we can do, what are its capabilities. 1 second, I think. Just give me a second. Okay, I hope you can see the screen now. So when we log into ChatGPT, this is the first screen we see. Here they specify a few examples, and we can actually go and put them in our chat interface and see what kind of output it produces, what the capabilities there are, and what the limitations are. Just like any other chat interface, we can put whatever we want to ask ChatGPT here. And the left side window is for all the previous chats that we have had. And I like to think of the left interface as, what are the thoughts and the work modules I'm working on. Because within a one chat module, ChatGPT understands what was also discussed before. So you can ask questions about whatever you discussed before, and it remembers them. And there are some wonderful use cases that we can build on top of it. Other than that, I would like to bring your attention to one of the key settings that we have here. So if you go in data control, we have a feature to export data. So if you click on export data, OpenAI sends you a copy of all the chats that you have done in an XML format, which is very reader friendly. And these are kind of like your notes, right? Based on like whatever research you have done, and all of the data is presented to you in a nice format that you can keep, even after you have deleted all the chats from here. So let's dive into how do we use it. So let's say the first question we want to ask ChatGPT is, what is ChatGPT? To understand what it is, and it gives some phenomenal answers, very detailed answers about everything that is, and we can cross-question it based on the information it has provided. Another thing we can do is, for example, let's say this is not exactly the format that we wanted this answer in, right? So we can go back and modify our prompt. So let's say, give me 3 key bullet points. And this is going to totally change the way in which it is going to present the answer. It understands that, I'm looking for something which is much more concise, and it is going to provide me to the point. And similarly, I can say, hey, provide it, in an XML format or whatever. Another thing is, we have this icon here, which kind of looks like a paste icon. But using this, we can copy the content. And I would suggest, like, rather than selecting and copying content, go for this option, because generally the output that ChatGPT produces, it is in Markdown language. And basically Markdown has information on what is heading, what is bold, what is italics. And even the links are presented in a way which, if you put it in XML in any other format, then it can produce like beautifully written content rather than just the text that is being produced, right? And that is pretty much about what the interface is. But like, again, you can ask more questions like, what is neural network, right? And one of the things that I want to show is like just give me one line answer. Or you can even say, explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old. And then it is going to simplify this concept in a manner that even a 5-year-old can understand. And similarly, you can even say things like, hey, I am an engineer. I understand how computers, like how programming works, but I don't understand how neural network works. And it is going to try and find the common ground between programming and neural network. And with that context, explain the answer to you. And like I was saying, that it understands the context of the previous conversation. So we can ask, what are the two questions we have discussed above in this chat? And then hopefully it will give us an output like these are the two things that we have discussed, right? So ideally what we can do is like, first we are trying to understand a particular problem, and then we're trying to implement the knowledge that we have gained from our previous discussion for a particular use case. So all of that can be done in a single chat interface. Okay. So back to the deck. So how I have structured it is basically you can find a lot of prompts on what you can do and how we can improve like content creation and things like that. But nobody is actually talking about like how this system works. And I think if you understand a little bit about how ChatGPT works, you will be able to come up with your prompts, which are going to be much more effective and much more useful for your specific task, right? And that is what I want to cover in the first half of the session. But if it becomes too technical or if it becomes like too dense, just please let me know so that we can just brush through them and then directly dive into a few examples. Because at the end of this, I want to discuss a few of the use cases that I use ChatGPT extensively for and some of the best practices. And I have lots of examples that I can share with you after the session. Okay, so what can ChatGPT do? That is a very broad statement, and people say it can create content creation, and that seems to be the prime, like the most important thing people are doing on the internet. But that is a very one-dimensional approach of seeing what ChatGPT can do, because ChatGPT can virtually do any task that requires understanding of natural language or code, right? And it is important for us to understand that even when we're communicating to other people, right? So it doesn't matter whether they're your thoughts, your opinions, your analysis, memories, concepts, narratives, stories, actions. They're all expressed as natural languages. So effectively, ChatGPT is capable of doing all these things. I mean, like you can ask ChatGPT to dream about something, and it is going to tell you what to dream about, right? And that is how powerful this technology is. And it also remembers what was discussed before in a particular chat thread, like we had seen, and that makes it quite different from the tools that we have used before. Let's talk about large language models. So large language models is what powers ChatGPT. Uh, Language models have been around for a very long time. It's like it has been there since, I would say, Nokia 1100, right? So basically what a language model is basically it's a statistical relationship between words. So for example, we have seen our auto suggest in our phone. We all use it extensively. We also have autocorrect. So all the auto suggest, autocorrect are powered by a language model. So and what this does is it sees what are the words that have come before, and based on that, what is the probability of the word which will come next. And that is as simple as that. That is what a language model is. But whereas this model might have only 100 to 500 parameters, a model like GPT-3 and GPT-4, which powers ChatGPT, have billions and trillions of parameters. Like there's no way that we can compare this with them, but effectively they are the same thing. This can predict what is the next word you're going to write here, whereas GPT can predict like what are the next 3,000 words that should come in this line, right? And there is in the documentation of GPT, I found a place where you can actually test it out. So for example, let's say this is the one, right? So let's try out the same example that we saw in the presentation just now. So for example, so the quick brown what? So you can see it says that the next word in this line should be fox with 97% accuracy. Then it says it should be jumps with 72% accuracy. And you will see as I keep typing a word, the accuracy keeps on increasing, right? It is able to predict more and more on what should come next. And that is similar to what happens when we use ChatGPT. For example, if I ask ChatGPT, or even if I ask you, recite the first law of robotics from Isaac Asimov from iRobo, right? It is like a robot may not injure a human being, or by inaction, it doesn't allow another human being to come to a harm. Pretty much that is the same response most of the people will give you if they know what we are talking about. And that is how GPT works. It just tries to continue the sentence that you started, and it just gives like the next few words on what should come next. And that is what large language models are predominantly, right? But this technology, this simple concept, is so powerful that it can do some great things. And other than language, so language model is pretty straightforward. It's a statistical relationship between words, and we don't need to understand more than that how it's calculated or what it's done, though we'll touch upon it a little more. Then the concept of neural networks. So neural networks is a paradigm which evolved in computer science in last 20 to 30 years. It is a very different way of doing programming, right? So traditionally, programming is basically algorithm. You have a step-by-step process and you just put it in code. Whereas neural networks are like a black box. So on one side, you put in inputs, and from the other side, you get the outputs. And all you tell this black box is whether the output it produced was right or wrong. And based on that understanding, it effectively understands what you're trying to do. It is very similar to what human brain does, but a human brain does it at I would say 1000x way better than what a machine does. It's a very simplified version of how the human brain and nervous system works. So it is like this, right? So we spent 12 years in school studying the basic subjects so that we have an understanding of how the world works, right? And basically, all the knowledge that we have gained in that 12 years is the input. And based on that input, we are able to understand how the world works. So if we see a problem, we have the data to look back on and have an understanding on how to solve this problem. The problem would be completely novel, but based on the information we have, we can do something about it. ChatGPT does something similar, but the data that it has been trained on is like millions and millions of basically like pages. Another important thing is what are prompts. So prompts are effectively user inputs, like we had seen here in the chat interface. Anything you put in here, like the questions we have asked, these are what are prompts. And like we have seen, like if we ask us what is ChatGPT, GPT is going to give us a different answer. Whereas if we ask what is ChatGPT, give me 3 bullet points, it is going to give me a different answer. And that is what we mean by prompt engineering. And there are like a lot of research papers which have been published recently, specifically on how we can do better prompt engineering. Another concept is completion. So completion is basically what was the ChatGPT's response. So this part and this part is basically what a completion is. And effectively what that means is how did GPT complete the sentence that you started, right? Another concept is tokens. And tokens are quite important to understand. And this is slightly technical, but we'll keep it at high level. So token is effectively how GPT understands the world. GPT doesn't understand grammar. GPT does not understand words. GPT does not understand that two words are synonyms of each other. All GPT understands are tokens. So one token is somewhere around 4 characters in English, but that is not an exact science. Let me give you an example. So OpenAI provides a page in their documentation which talks about tokens and how GPT understands tokens. So for example, here is a text, which is basically human readable text, right, that we understand. So it's like many words map to one token, but some doesn't, some don't, just like indivisible. So every word here, like many is one token, words is another token, maps is another token. But one of the key things to notice here is it is not just words, but even the space before it. The space and words is one particular token. But if we see something like indivisible, then it is made up of 3 different tokens. And that is not just the only word, even the Unicode is again 3 codes, 3 different tokens, whereas the emojis are special. So how ChatGPT understands emojis, basically it understands the bits that were used to create this emoji. So in this case, we can see this hand emoji is basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different tokens. So these 6 different tokens in this particular sequence is what represents this particular hand. And every token has something like a roll number, right? So it's like no matter where many with a capital M appears, it is going to be mapped to 7085. One of the key things to note here is there is a many here and there is another many here. So these both will not have the same roll number, so to say, right? Or the token ID. For two reasons, this many has capital M and this one has a small m. So generally this many will come at the beginning of a sentence, whereas this many is going to come in between sentence. And this many also has a space before it, right? And these are mapped to different token IDs. And what GPT actually understands is the relationship between tokens. And that is the key thing to understand. Because when it comes to number, we might perceive this as a number, right? So, but GPT has divided this particular number into different tokens and it treats them like strings or like words. For example, 1, 2, 3 is a word which comes very frequently in English. It's like 1, 2, 3. So it takes it as one token. 4, 5 is another token. 6, 7 is another token. Or like not even 6, 7. 6, 7, 8 as a token. And 9, 0 as a different token. And that is one of the main reasons why if we ask GPT to do a very complicated calculation, generally it doesn't give us a good answer because it is not treating them like numbers like humans do, but it's treating them like strings and trying to go back to its memory and understand when these words had appeared, what was the response at that time, and trying to give us that response. So now that we understand tokens, I think one of the key things to understand is GPT has a certain limitations, and these limitations are basically governed by how many tokens they can produce at one time, right? So GPT 3.5 Turbo is the model that powers the free GPT model, and it has a maximum of 4,096 tokens, which is approximately 3,000 words. And why this is significant is, let's say you have created a prompt which is 2,000 words long, and you want GPT to produce ChatGPT to produce a response which is another 2,000 words long. That is not possible because that falls beyond the capability of ChatGPT. It can only produce next 1,000 words, and then it is going to stop. And sometimes it'll even say, "Hey, your prompt is too big. I cannot give an answer to this because it goes beyond the token limit," right? And when we talk about GPT-4, basically GPT-4 has just doubled this limit. And that is why you can basically give it a lot more input. Or if you're giving it less input, it can produce a lot more output. So there is always a trade-off between your prompt and the output you want, because the token limit is for both. It is like for the entire conversation that has happened before, plus the response that you want ChatGPT to give. All of them have to fall in this max token limit. There are ways to get around them. For example, you can ask ChatGPT to summarize your entire conversation, and where it was taking 2,000 words space, now it will take, let's say, 200 word space, right? And you have most of the context in that summary, and you don't need the conversation that happened before. And that is pretty much it from like a technical point of view. What are the limitations of GPT and things like that? Do you have any questions? We'll take a pause here, see if anybody has a question. You can unmute your mic or you can put them in comments and we can answer them. Okay, so if there are no questions, then we will move forward. So another thing I want to briefly touch upon is a point of view on GPT, like how it is changing the world and what are the things which are being discussed about, right? Without going too much in depth, but how it is changing our relationship with how we communicate to machines, and also how it's changing our relationship with each others, right? So in the past, and I'm assuming, right, most of us are knowledge workers here. And when I say knowledge workers, what I mean is most of us, for us, our work basically requires that we consume large amount of information, process it, and produce it in a format that fulfills a particular job. One second, I have a question from Mahesh. This maximum includes both user input and GPT output. Also, does it include previous user inputs? Yes. So the answer is it includes both the input that was provided to GPT and the GPT's output, as well as the conversations that we had before. But when we are chatting with ChatGPT, what it does it, if we have, let's say there are 5,000 words in our conversation, so it only factors in like last 3,000 words. It ignores the conversation that we had before that. So for example, let's say you have had a very long conversation with GPT, and then you ask him, hey, what was the first thing we discussed? So it will not be able to answer that question. So that's why one of the good things to do is once you think the conversation with GPT is getting too long, you can ask GPT, hey, can you summarize what you have discussed so far? And it's going to summarize and put it there. And then that information will be there for the future conversations if you want to refer back to it. Another question we have is, how does GPT decide what model to train itself on? I mean, it can become biased, right? So the GPT model is pre-trained. That is what the P in GPT stands for. And it has decided, like basically ChatGPT went through a training before we started using it, right? And it is not trained on a daily basis. So for example, when the update for GPT came out, I think it came somewhere around June, right? On July 20th was the last time GPT was updated. So after July 20th till today, the model is not updated. It is the same model that we are using. So these models come at a frequency of around once a month. And this is being trained by human trainers. And a part of it is auto-trained by GPT. But the human trainers make sure that the kind of output GPT producing are in line with the policies of OpenAI, and that basically it's correct, right? Because everybody interacts with GPT model in their own way, and there are some bad elements who can basically make GPT biased. And obviously, the GPT still has a lot of bias. How OpenAI is trying to take care of bias is using their own policies. So if they see that one of any of the output the GPT produce violates one of their policies, then they try to filter out that content and not show it to us. But since it is a neural network model, it is like garbage in, garbage out. That's like how we say in programming. So if the input that is put in ChatGPT is bad, we are going to get bad output. So the only way to make sure that there is no bias in the system is to remove it in the input. But if we remove it in the input, then then the amount of data that we'll put in GPT is going to be very less, right? And that is going to produce bad results in the future. So the question of bias is always that of a trade-off, and I think this is an ongoing discussion in AI industry, and we don't have a solution like a solution which works out of the box for any of the AI models. And that problem is not just limited to ChatGPT, but any neural network powered model right now. Okay. So coming back to our discussion. So I want to present a point of view on ChatGPT because there's a lot of conversation around how it's going to change workspace, how it is going to change our relationship with other people, how it's going to change our relationship with machines. So like I mentioned before, we have to look at ChatGPT as an interface to interact with machines. Previously, the only way we could do that was using programming effectively, right? And if we are not programmer, we would need a programmer to build an interface like a website or an application or an app for mobile phones through which we can interact with databases or with other machines. Whereas what ChatGPT has done is it has provided a mechanism in which we can just talk to a machine and it understands what we're talking about, right? So in the past, let's say I am a developer and I have run into an issue which I'm not able to solve in my programming. So the workflow previously used to be I'll go to Google, put in my problem, I'll find some Stack Overflow answer that is going to solve my problem. I'll go understand how that particular problem was solved. And then I'm going to use that knowledge to solve the problem that I'm having right now. Whereas what an interface like ChatGPT does is, right then and there, I can tell it what my problem is, and that entire process of taking in new information, processing it, putting in a form, like understanding it and getting the output I want, that work I can outsource to ChatGPT, right? So it is a completely new medium, and it is and like ChatGPT is not connected to internet, but we can build applications in which ChatGPT can directly talk to internet, just like how Google does, and find the relevant answer. And rather than just giving us the links where we find the relevant information, it'll just tell you, hey, this is the information you want, this is the answer to your question. And little later in our seminar, I'll show you one of the apps that I have built. It is in a pretty nascent phase, but it'll prove the point that I'm talking about. But it's not just that, right? So it's like, for example, we have our own notes. Like it's like we could have our own journal. We could have our own knowledge management system in a company where they have put all the information of all the employees that they have gathered. It could have all the decks. It could have all the PDF files. So currently, the only way that we interact with those documents is using a search engine. And basically, what search engine does, it sees the query we have typed and it searches for the same keyword in those documents and gives us that. It doesn't understand exactly the question that we're looking for. GPT solves that problem as well, right? So there are a lot of specific use cases that it has like removed a lot of the work that we as humans had to do in understanding a lot of content which was not really relevant to us, but it was like the knowledge that we had to take and pre-process and then use it for our own outcomes. So that thing is something which, so it's like rather than content creators or like basically kind of like creating new content, what is going to happen is we are going to become more like curators. It's like I'll keep handy all the notes that I've had in college, and then I have this system that I can ask, hey, in college, I know that there was this one particular concept we had studied about the golden circle. So can you tell me how can I use the golden circle framework for the problem I'm having right now? And it is going to go through my notes, understand where I talked about golden circle, what were the thoughts I had back then, and it's going to implement those things on the problem that I'm having right now. Another major change that is happening is at workplaces, where there's a lot of this conversation about, hey, ChatGPT is going to remove so many jobs. That is not a new problem. Like I spent like around 5 years in IT companies, and I know that this is something which has been happening from last decade. So to give you an example, so once we have, let's say we have a query from a company and we call the call center, or let's say we drop them an email. So previously there used to be a person who will look at that problem and then decide whether it should go to a team A or a team B, right? So kind of like an operator. But machines became so smart that they're able to do that job. And this was like 10 years back. Only thing that is happening now is people who are doing slightly complex tasks. For example, I remember there was this one team of analysts in my company. So it's like, let's say I have to pitch a solution to Tesla, right? And then I need to understand what is happening in Tesla right now, like who are the CEOs, who are the key people, and like what are the news items about Tesla which are happening right now. So that when I go and talk to Tesla, those I'm at the same level of knowledge as those people are. And generally, there used to be an analyst team who had access to a lot of data from all these analytics company, and then they will compile a deck for me, and then I can look at it, and then based on the deck, I can go and present my solution to them. Hey, you are having this problem from last 5 years. My solution can solve it. Now, with something like ChatGPT, that entire analysis part can be outsourced to a bot. And this is not like ChatGPT bot, but a bot that is custom built by the company for their specific use cases. But the limitations are still the same. They cannot directly put this output and give it to me saying, hey, this is the output we have got, use it. Because there might be obvious errors in it, like even the data might not be accurate, or the bot might have hallucinated, or the information is presented in a way in which it cannot be used. So what we can foresee is, like, rather than hiring, let's say, another 10 developers in the future, we can build technology which can do the work of those 10 people. And what this is going to do is people who currently start using chatbots or any kind of bots which are powered by these large language models, they can boost their efficiency by 10x and sometimes even as much as 50x and 100x. So rather than having 10 people reporting to them, these people can do the work of those 10 people. And that is something which has been happening for a very long time. It is nothing new. We have seen it happen in the manufacturing industry, where robots are able to do work for much more precision. We have seen it in like BPO industry, where more and more work is being done by bots. But the thing is, now this is going to come to basically a more at a much larger scale. And the thing that we need to note here is it is not that it is only going to take jobs away. It is also going to create new jobs because there's a huge demand for people who can leverage these bots to build solutions and maintain these bots and make sure that they understand how these bots work and basically do work of 10 people rather than how the work was done traditionally. And I would like to conclude this session with 3 amazing use cases as per me in the market today, right? So the first one is Khan Amigo. So Khan Amigo is a learning bot from Khan Academy. So Khan Academy is basically a not-for-profit organization with backing of Google. And I think they were founded somewhere around 2006, 2007 by this person called Sal Khan, right? And like I have a lot of respect for that guy. So what he has done is he has built this academy called Khan Academy. And it is basically like Byju's for the world, whether you are preparing for JEE, whether you're preparing for your board exams, or you are in college. They have all the knowledge that you need on their website, and you can test your knowledge against the questions they have. Their video lectures and exercises that you can do. And now what they have done is they have used the technology of ChatGPT as a mentor and an assistant right there next to you. So for example, you got stuck solving a problem and you have no idea how to go ahead with a particular problem, and even the video is not helping. So you can ask a question to the bot, hey, can you give me the answer, like in this case? And it doesn't give you the answer right away, but rather has a conversation with you so that you can identify where your knowledge is lacking or help you understand the concepts better, right? And that I think is an amazing use case. He has a TED talk on it, which you can check out to understand what exactly this is doing and how big this use case is. Another use case is of Duolingo Max. So Duolingo is an app that you can use to learn new languages, and they have like lots of languages you can learn. And one of the major pains that we have when we're learning a new language is we don't have somebody to practice it with. It's like you would learn French, but none of your friends speak French, and then after 1 year, everything you've learned, you have forgotten. So what this bot does is you can ask this bot to role play in different situations. So I can tell it like, hey, you are a barista in a cafe in France. So it is going to talk to you in French and you can practice your French with it. And then let's say if you have a specific phrase you're not able to understand, it can explain to you exactly why this phrase makes sense, what is the grammar behind it, how you should answer it, and things like that. Another use case, which is very powerful, is that of GitHub Copilot. So GitHub Copilot is a plugin that you can put in your development IDE, like Visual Studio Code or anywhere. And when you are writing code, let's say there is a particular kind of code that you need to write on everyday basis. Let's say you want a boilerplate for HTML. So previously, either you will have it in another file, copy paste it, or you'll go to Google, search for it and put it in your code. Rather than that, you can just write what you want in it. And for your specific use case, it will create a function or a code that just works. And you can review it, modify it, and just continue working in your IDE without leaving it. So the entire workflow where you go to Google, search for a solution, go to Substack, Stack Overflow, look for a solution, understand how the solution works, modify it for your specific problem, and then continue coding is like it just evaporates if you just download this plugin. Okay, so are there any questions? So what I want to discuss next are the use cases that I use ChatGPT for most often. But if there are any questions before that, I would like to answer them. Because right now we will only discuss specific use cases and examples, and we'll not do much of theory after this. And I'll make this deck accessible to you after the webinar, and all of them are like hyperlinks to specific chats from ChatGPT that you can see and use in your own ChatGPT app. Okay, if there are no questions, I'll continue. So one of the use cases that I like ChatGPT most for is explaining complex concepts, right? To give you an example, so for example, explaining complex subject matter, right? So here is an example for you. It's like quantum computing, something which is taking a lot of hold. We have a quantum computer from IBM finally. that is open to public. But not many of us understand how it works, and like it is quite complicated for us to wrap our head around quantum physics itself. So quantum computer is a totally different ballgame. But if we ask ChatGPT to, let's say, explain quantum computing to me, to a 5-year-old, it creates a response that even a 5-year-old can understand. And doesn't matter what question you have. It could be about, hey, why does the universe keep on expanding? Or it could be as simple as that, hey, how do you add two numbers in Excel? Or do you want to do something specific? You can ask the question, and ChatGPT is the subject matter expert you will need. Another thing, which is kind of a fun use case that I use ChatGPT for, is to understand things that I come across in daily life, right? So I was watching one of the YouTube videos, and there was this joke in it. It's like, hey, why do programmers always mix up Halloween and Christmas? And the answer is because October 31st is equal to December 25. And this joke made no sense to me. And I just put it in, and basically ChatGPT gives a very nice answer saying that, hey, oct stands for base 10 and dex stands for base 10. Like oct stands for base 8 and dex stands for base 10. And when you turn them, they both come up to 25. And that is the reason they confuse it. And it is not just this. It's like, for example, whether you want to understand lyrics of a song. Like the other day, I was asking ChatGPT to explain Starboy by Weekend to me, and it explained it to me line by line that, this is what it means. And it told ChatGPT that, hey, I don't have any cultural context of America, but I really like the song and I would like to understand what it means. And it explained the entire song to me. You can, and you can even ask like it to explain Tenet to you, like a 5-year-old, and it's going to do a very good job at explaining about the movie. Another thing that you can do with it is write, audit, and explain code or a piece of text, right? Not all of us are coders, but this is something that we come across a lot in our daily life. So one thing is like one of the first things that you do when you're learning coding is to do these basic things like, hey, write a code to print an inverted triangle of stars with the base having 5 stars in Python. And it is just going to write that code for you. And if you copy paste it in an IDE, it is going to give you the exact result that you wanted it. But that's not it. Let's say you came across a code somewhere and you want to understand, you don't understand this language. Let's say you understand Java, but not Python. And you can ask it to explain this code to you. And it goes line by line explaining exactly what is happening here. And then using this, you will get a good idea about what exactly this person is trying to do. Similarly, for example, another use case could be the legal documents. So it's like the language in legal document is quite complicated. Let's say you have a rent agreement and there is particular word, like 2 lines that you're not able to understand. And you can tell ChatGPT, in my rent agreement, I came across these 2 lines. Can you explain it to me in non-legal terms? And it will do a very good job at explaining what exactly is meant by those 2 lines. And you can even ask it things like that, hey, will I get in trouble if I leave my house early or whatever? And it will give you a good enough answer for that. Another one that ChatGPT can do is it can help with problem solving and answering questions. So for example, you can ask it any question you might have in your mind, which you don't want to go out to somebody else. It's like, hey, how do I be in present moment all the time? Or like, I get angry at my dog all the time. What should I do? Or, what is the best way to reverse your car in parking? And it is going to give an answer which is customized to you. And then you can basically ask it follow-up questions on that. And it understands the context of what was discussed before. And the answer keeps getting better and better. Another thing it can do is it can implement frameworks. And I think that is my favorite use case for ChatGPT and what I use it most for. So for example, when I was doing my MBA, there was this framework called Golden Circle, right? And it is a messaging framework from Simon Sinek. And he talks about why do some companies become so popular with their audience and why do others don't. And he keeps giving this classical example that, Apple has a cult following, whereas Dell and Lenovo are like just another computer manufacturing companies. And what he says is it's mainly because Apple basically talks about why they're doing what they're doing rather than what they're doing. It's like Dell says we make laptops, Lenovo says we make amazing laptops, but whereas Apple talks about, we want to empower creative people, and for that, and we happen to make good laptops. So why don't we mix these two together? And that is where their entire vision and the company's vision comes from. And basically, it is like a 260-page book which he had written. And to get the complete context of it, you need to go through the entire book, and it's an amazing book. But let's say you don't have the time, or maybe this task is not that critical to you, and you can just ask ChatGPT, right? I run a generative AI company where I consult and train people to be more effective using ChatGPT like tools. Can you help me come up with a messaging for my company using the Golden Circle framework created by Simon Sinek? And then what it is going to do is it is going through the entire framework where it's going to talk about, hey, you should come up with a why. And it comes up with some amazing responses also, right? And with that less input, it is able to do this is simply amazing. And it comes up with, hey, this is your why, maybe, and then this is your how, this is your what. And then it comes up with actually a messaging also, which is actually quite accurate, right? It's like, hey, like at Tech Studio, we are on a mission to transform the way individuals and businesses interact with AI. Our purpose is to empower you with limitless potential of generative AI, unlocking the worlds of creativity and productivity. And like, this is just perfect. And if I would have just asked him to come up with a messaging, it would not have done such a good job. But I gave it a direction that, hey, I know about this one framework about messaging, which I really like and I understand. And why don't you use that framework here? And it actually used the framework, and then it came up with the solution to the problem that I had given to it. And there are frameworks everywhere, right? It's like if you want to analyze a company, you can do the SWOT analysis. And then if you're like, there are like so many frameworks. And the best part is, if you're looking to find a framework for a particular problem, you can ask ChatGPT. It's like, hey, this is a problem I want to solve. Are there any frameworks to help me solve it? And it'll tell you, cut. These are the 5 frameworks that you can use. And then you can ask ChatGPT to explain those frameworks to you. And then you can ask ChatGPT to implement those frameworks to you. And that is quite remarkable. So another thing that I use ChatGPT a lot for is paraphrasing and reformatting. So basically what I mean by paraphrasing and reformatting is you can turn one piece of content in another format. So it's like you can take a transcript and turn it into an article. You can take an article, turn it into bullet points. You can take a bullet point, turn it into an email, right? It's like there's so many times when we know exactly what we need to put in an email, but we know it's going to take too much time that we postpone it. But if we have to just write those 3 bullet points, these are the 3 things I want from this person, and you can write it in bullet point and ask ChatGPT, hey, can you convert it into a full-fledged email for me? And it'll do that. To give an example, so this is an article from Immanuel Kant. He is the guy who gave us the famous phrase, I think, therefore I am. So he had written this article on what is enlightenment. And let's say I don't have time to go through it. So I can just say, give me a bullet point summary for the following article, right? And ChatGPT goes through the entire article and gives me the bullet points in the end. And I can even say, hey, what are the 3 key messages from this article that I should know? And rather than giving me the entire summary, it will give me only those 3 bullet points that I should, that I should, right? Another thing it can do is it can have conversations, and I don't mean just the simple ChatGPT conversations. You can basically build your own bots, and like you can turn ChatGPT into an interviewer or someone that you can interview. You can turn ChatGPT into a translator. We'll discuss the interview example a little later. But what you can also do is, for example, let's say, hey, you can tell ChatGPT, hey, you're Gandalf the Grey from Lord of the Rings. You talk in the manner as Gandalf and you know everything about Lord of the Rings. I'm going to ask you questions and you're going to answer like Gandalf. And from that moment onward, in that particular chat thread, ChatGPT is going to become Gandalf. It is going to answer like how Gandalf answers questions in movie and books. It knows everything about Frodo Baggins, about the Lonely Mountains, about Elrond, about what happened in Mount Doom and everything. And talking about chatbot, let me just give you a simple example. So this is a system which is there in the documentation for ChatGPT, right? So it's like, hey, Marv is a chatbot that electronically answers questions with sarcastic responses. And then I have given it a few examples. And giving examples is important for ChatGPT because there are a few research papers who are published on it. And there are 3 key ways you can prompt when you're trying to build a complex system. They're called zero-shot prompting, one-shot prompting, and multi-prompting, multi-shot promptings, right? So zero-shot means you don't give any example. So ChatGPT produces an output based on what it thinks is the right output here. When you give one example, that gives ChatGPT a good idea on what kind of response you want from it. And when you give it multiple examples, the more examples you give, better it gets. So for example, here, it's like we have given it some examples that, that I'm asking how many pounds are in a kg. And the response I want is this again. There are 2.2 pounds in a kg. Please make a note of this. Or like, what does HTML stand for? Was Google too busy? Hypertext markup language. And the T is to try to ask better questions in the future. And then I ask it like, what time is it? And it says, hey, oh, let me guess, you don't own a clock. It's time for you to get one. So you can turn ChatGPT into a chatbot, which is like totally sarcastic. And similarly, you can ask it to become like a marketing consultant, or you can ask it to become, let's say, an image consultant, or like someone who's like a very good at statistics, who's somebody who's very good at business analytics. And it is going to answer your questions from that point of view. And it role plays wonderfully. Another thing you can do is you can build a system. So when I say build a system, what I can say is like one of the most common use cases that we have in office today are we have to send MOMs, right? Minutes of the meetings after we have done a meeting. And that's such a tedious task because we have taken notes, but we have to turn it into action items and we have to give a summary of what was discussed and things like that. So here's the system we have built, right? So you will be provided with meeting notes, and your task is to summarize the meeting as follows. Overall summary of discussion, action items, what needs to be done and who is doing it. If applicable, a list of topics that needs to be discussed more fully in the next meeting. And I just say, give me a thumbs up if you understand. And ChatGPT is like, hey, I understand. Please provide me with the meeting notes. And then I give it the notes that I have for the particular meeting. And it is going to just translate this into the format I have given it. It's like, hey, overall summary of the discussion, action items with which person is supposed to do what, topics for the next meeting. And I can just review it and send it across. My headache of sending MOMs is just like done and dusted. And you can build systems for pretty much everything, right? Anything that you do daily that requires very little input from you, but the main requirement is that it needs to go in a particular format. It can be done using ChatGPT. Another one is ideation. So ideation is, I think, one of the best use cases for this, and it shows how powerful ChatGPT is. So here's a very simple example, right? Let's say I'm a marketing consultant and somebody has asked me for product names for their brand. So I tell them, the product description is a home milkshake maker, and the seed words, which is like basically the keywords in their tagline or what they want to focus on, is like fast, healthy, and compact. And based on these two inputs, it's going to give multiple options. Similarly, I can even say, I can tell it like, hey, here's an article. I'm thinking of turning it into a series of tweets. Can you help me with turning them into tweets? And it'll give you like 10 tweets on how you can translate that article into those particular tweets. And you can pick and choose the best one and send it across. So I guess we'll take a break here. I have some best practices that I want to discuss later. But are there any specific use cases that you want from ChatGPT, or do you have any questions that you would like to discuss? Okay, looks like nothing so far. But if you have a question, do drop it in the chat messages and we can pick it from there. So next, the question that we need to ask is, one second. Okay, thanks, Gangotri. So next question that we need to ask is, basically, are there any specific ways in which we can provide input in a better format to ChatGPT so that the responses it gives and the things it does are more in line with what we expect from it, right? And we need to understand here one key thing, that ChatGPT is a model which was trained. If we are in synergy with the way this model was trained, it is going to produce good outputs. If we are asking ChatGPT to do something that it was not trained for, then it's going to produce bad outputs, right? So these tactics are more about using the same way it was trained. And what I would do is I'll not go through them in detail, but since you will have this deck, you can go and check. Similarly, for all of them, there is a corresponding example. So the first one is pretty simple, right? Write clear instructions. So it's like, include as many details as possible. And details, how you can add more details. You can say, hey, this is my role in the company. Hey, this is what I'm trying to do. And this is what I want you to do for me. And you can write paragraphs about it. You can like one line, or you can like 3 paragraphs about it. But the more information you give to ChatGPT, more it understands. And we also need to look at it from this point of view, right? That ChatGPT, only context that ChatGPT has about what we're trying to do is what input we are going to provide it. So if we think there is some relevant information that ChatGPT should know, if we include it in our prompt, it is going to give good results. Another thing that we can do is we can ask ChatGPT to adopt a persona. So for example, let's say we have asked, so we have a marketing related task. So we don't want a general response to it. We want something which is very specific to what we want to do. So here, let's say I'm preparing for a job interview, right? And this job interview is specifically for a marketing manager. So I can clearly tell it, we are going to do a role play. You will take up the persona of job interviewer and ask me interview questions and wait for my response before asking another question. The interview is for the position of product marketing manager. And like you can change this to any other role that you're trying to apply for. And now on in this thread, ChatGPT has become your interviewer for a particular role. So it's like, sure, I'm happy to play the role of job interviewer for the position of marketing manager. Let's begin the role. So it's like the first question it asks is, welcome. Thank you for coming today. Let's start with the classic question. Can you please tell me more about your background and experience in marketing? And more you talk to this chat thread, more nuanced it gets, because once you talk about your experience to it, the questions it asks are not generic, but it'll ask things like, oh, how did you solve this particular problem in your last role? Oh, this sounds interesting. Can you tell me more about it? And you can actually have a full-fledged interview experience with the chatbot. Another one that is, I think, a key point to note is when we are providing it input, it is better if it is within delimited. It is delimited by some form of input, right? So here I have used triple quotes, and this is what even OpenAI recommends. And the reason for this is basically in Python, when you're putting a comment, you put it between three quotes, right? Other than this, what you can do is you can use an HTML format where you can just like put angular brackets and like put article in it and then close those angular brackets. So ChatGPT understands that anything which is within these two tags is basically the article that this person is talking about. And similarly, you can even have like article 1, article 2, article 3, and then ask ChatGPT to summarize the 3 articles. And that is, I think, one of the best ways to solve when you have a lot of input to give, so that ChatGPT understands clearly that these are 3 different inputs, 4 different inputs. And you can even say, like, this is the user input, this is the resource you need to refer, and these are the questions I need to ask. Specify steps required for a complex task. So, for example, here is an example I had created where it's like, use the following step-by-step instructions to respond to user's input. The user will provide you with a text in triple quotes. Summarize this text in 3 sentences with the prefix that says summary. And step 2 is convert the summary into tweet and prefix it with tweet. So now it understands much more clearly what it needs to do. So it is going to produce the output also in the same format. First, it is going to summarize whatever you tell it to, and then it is going to use the summary to turn it into tweets. And it intrinsically understand that, the tweet needs to be 280 characters. Sometimes it goes over this limit, but all you need to ask is, hey, this tweet needs to be shorter, and it is going to shorten that tweet. And you can build any such system. It is not just limited to tweets. You can build your own systems. Like maybe you need to analyze a particular article or a particular code block, or something else, like a transcript. You can even say, hey, step 1 is turn this transcript into an article. Step 2 is turn this article into a summary. Step 3 is turn it into a tweet, or give me the key points from what I need to know about it. Or you can even say things like, I'm just interested in knowing like who are the 3 key characters in this story. And then it is going to understand it. It is going to give you a summary of these are the characters, and this is what they did, and this is their role in the story. Third one, like the last one, is basically you need to specify your desired length. We have seen this example before, right? If you just say, hey, turn it into bullet points, it will turn it into lots of bullet points. But if you say turn it into 3 bullet points, it is going to give you the 3 main points from this particular article. And similarly, right? So it's like, you can say it should be 300 words long, it should be 2 paragraphs long, it should be less than 100 characters or whatever. The second way we can improve our prompts is basically we can give it reference text, like we had mentioned. And if we're giving it data, generally it's better to give data in a CSV format. So CSV format is basically comma separated format. Let me see if I have an example here. So for example, this is data about 2022 season of Formula One. If we can open this in Excel sheet, if we open it in Excel sheet, it becomes like a human readable format. But it is each and every cell is separated by a comma. So if we copy paste it in ChatGPT, it understands it better rather than just copy pasting a table, because it does not accept table input right now. And then it can give us very good responses. Like we can ask questions from it. Like we can ask it to present in a tabular format. And then we can even ask questions like, who is the driver with the most wins? Who is the driver with the most world championships? And it is going to look through this data and provide us with an output. Another thing is sometimes the task that we ask ChatGPT to do, it might be beyond the token limit, or it might be just too complex. So what we can do is, let's say we have an article which is let's say it's 6,000 words long, right? And we understand that it only takes 3,000 words at one time. So what we can do is we can divide this article in 3 pieces. So in the first one, and then we can say, like, hey, give me a summary of this article. And you can also say to ChatGPT that I'm going to give you more inputs. I'm going to give you more articles in the future, so you need to summarize all of them. And then, for example, in this case, I'm going to provide you an input in multiple parts. Every time I provide you an input, you will summarize all the text I have provided you and the previous summaries, and list the instructions after the end of the summary, because it might forget the instructions if you don't do that. And here I provided half of the book as a man think it. Since it's in Project Gutenberg, there's no copyrights on it. And this is quite a long text, and it summarizes it, provides the instructions again. I give it more content from the book, summarizes it, and provides the instruction again. And in the end, I can just say, hey, give me the final summary. And it would have summarized an entire book, which is like around 30,000 words. And it would have summarized in under 3,000 words for me. The other use case that we have here is basically, so user intent classifier, right? So this is a slightly complex use case. Let's say we have to build a system where users come up with a query for the customer support executives, and we need to classify them as which category do they fall in. So we can tell ChatGPT that, hey, these are the primary categories, and every primary category has separate category. And then you need to provide it in a particular format, right? Or somewhere it's provided. Provide the output in a JSON format with the keys primary and secondary. And once we give it an input, like I need to get my internet working again, it can shortlist it that, primary category is technical support, secondary category is troubleshooting. And the benefit of this is we can directly use it in the programming framework. Another one is we should give ChatGPT time to think. So we have to look at it, when we were in school, we used to get marks for each and every step. So we should never ask ChatGPT to just give us the final output. Once it goes step by step, it gives better outputs, because like I had mentioned before, it does not understand the logic behind things. All it knows is what is going to come next. So when we ask it to go step by step, effectively it understands after this line I should put this, after this line I should put this, and then the output that comes out of it is generally a very good output. Another thing that we can do is, if we want ChatGPT to do something and we ourselves don't have a good idea about it, first thing we can do is ask ChatGPT, how do you do particular things? So let's say you want to create goals for yourself, and you want to create smart goals, right? Specific, measurable, and all that. So first thing you can do is ask ChatGPT, hey, what are smart goals? So it will go and print information about what smart goals are. Then you can ask, hey, how do I set smart goals? And then it is going to come up with a few more inputs on how do you set smart goals. And then you can say, okay, I want to run a marathon in 3 months. Can you create a smart goal for me? And then it will have all the context that is needed to create a smart goal for you. And after that, you can even say, hey, create a plan for me to run a marathon in 3 months, and it is going to create a plan for you as well. Another thing is you can ask ChatGPT for inputs, and I think this is quite powerful. So one of the two main ways I do this is basically I can ask, hey, I want to start a company, let's say, or like I want to create a brand for my company and I don't know which color palettes to use. And can you ask me multiple choice questions to understand what kind of color palette I should use? So here the entire point of multi-choice is so that I can get some direction on how to answer this particular question. My responses don't need to be limited to those multiple choice questions. I can answer whatever I want. But now ChatGPT actually gives me direction about how to solve a particular problem. And obviously the other way is I can ask it to interview me. I can say like, I want to create an email campaign. You are an expert in email campaign who has experience in marketing. Can you interview me? And at the end of the interview, give me a plan on how what my marketing email campaign should be. And it is going to do the work for me, right? And that's pretty much it. Other than that, I want to show you Playground. I think we have 15 minutes left. Just let me give me 5 minutes and I'll just wrap it up. So Playground is basically a feature that OpenAI provides to developers, but I think everybody can use it and everybody should use it. So the interface looks something like this. And what you can do is you can create your own systems and you can even provide some sample inputs. And there is this temperature feature that they provide, which is not provided in ChatGPT. So basically, when you take the temperature to 0, it gives you the same response every time, unlike ChatGPT. Whereas if you take it to the other extreme to all the way to 2, it gives you very creative responses, right? So let's create a system. You create jokes based on user input, right? And then I say, a man walked into the bar and just hit submit. And then it is going to come up with a, okay, looks like I'll have to use a different version. Just give me a second. Right? And then an order a pint of beer, the bartender said. Why the long face? The man replied, well, I just finished a marathon and let's just say my feet are aching as much as my pride. And that's a very good joke. Now the thing is, if I delete this and print it again, ideally it should come up with a slightly different jokes. But if I take the temperature all the way down to 0, every time I hit enter, it is going to give me the same results. And this is going to be much more deterministic. So if I'm using ChatGPT to solve a specific problem, which only has one correct answer, I think Playground is the way to go. And there are a lot of other things you can do. And once you have built a system, the best part is you can actually turn it into a code. And if you're building an app, you can use it there. And I will also like to showcase a couple of apps that I have built using ChatGPT just as experiments to show you what it is capable of. So I call this Themes in Indian History GPT. So in India, we have NCERT, right, which publishes textbooks for CBSE. And all these books are available for free online. So what I did was, there are 3 history textbooks. I passed them into a text format, which turn into Word documents here. And this is like very raw parse. I have not looked at it at all. I just know that using a PDF parser, it just converted those PDFs into text. And then I converted it into a format that ChatGPT understands. And now with like less than 100 lines of code, I have built a system in which basically it asks me that, hey, sorry, this is the wrong one. 1 second. I hope it works. So it's like, what do you want to know? And I can ask it questions like, who was Ashoka, right? And what it does is, first, it goes and sees whether everything is spelled correctly. So ChatGPT goes and sees and corrects it for grammar and spelling errors. And then what it does is it goes through the entire textbook that I have given it in like bits and pieces. So what I've done is I have divided into 1,000 characters each. And it goes and sees whether it can, which are the stanzas where it can find the answers, gets the top 5 answers and create an answer for me. right? So it is like, and this answer is not from the ChatGPT's knowledge base, but from the textbook that I have provided it. So it is like, if there is a 12th standard kid who wants to understand, wants a completely new way of talking to their textbook, it is possible now. And it even gives references, right? So specific things where this information is picked up from. I can go and search for this exact text in the textbook, and I know, okay, this is exactly where this information was being talked about. And since this textbook talks, it is like a three-part textbook which talks about ancient history, old history, and then the modern history. I can ask it any question from the time of Mahabharata all the way to Indian freedom fighting and independence, and it knows most. It gives very nice answers to those questions. And I just use and we could just build it using 100 lines of code. Another one that I built just for fun was the joke one. So all you need to do is you need to provide it like three people, and it's going to like XYZ walked into the bar joke. And to do this with code is very difficult, because first you need to understand that which are the three people I'm talking about. Then go look in a library for a similar joke and give me that joke. And these jokes are being created on the fly. So let's say mobile, a phone, and iPhone, let's say, an iPhone. So it's like, it's going to take a moment. It's like, hey, the three characters are a mobile, a phone, and iPhone. And sure, here's a walk into the bar joke featuring these three characters. A mobile, a phone, and iPhone walked into the bar. The bartender looked at them and said, "Sorry, we don't serve your kind here." The mobile phone replied, "That's okay. We'll just go to a hotspot instead." And these jokes are like highly contextual. Like, it understands not just the words, but what do they represent. And it is just amazing, like that we can build code. We can code. This is like a totally new way of coding. Another thing that I have done is basically it has access to a news API, which can fetch news in like whatever news has happened in the last 1 month. And then you can, so like I found out that there was an earthquake in Jaipur, which like not much is being talked about. So you can talk about like, earthquake in Jaipur. And it is going to go first, it is going to try to understand what are the keywords that it needs to extract from this. So it creates a sequence of keywords. Then it sends these keywords to an API to fetch the relevant news. Then what it does, it creates a hypothetical answer for what I want to know. So it can match that answer with the news that it has got from the API, so that it can find the relevant news for me. And then it's going to get like top 5 news items which talk about this thing, summarize them, and present it to me with links to all those relevant news articles if you want to know more about it. I hope the API is working right now. Let's see. Okay, let me try it just one more time. Okay, it's here. So it's like an earthquake of magnitude 4.5 struck Jaipur. Panic-stricken people rushed out of their houses and tremors. So this is actual news. And these are the links to the, like this is, these are the news which has happened in the last 1 month. So this is as current as it can get. And you can ask like, hey, what are the stocks to buy in NSE right now? And there would be definitely news articles on it, and it can direct us to that news article. And the last one is an email generator. So one of the main things, like if you are in sales, one of the main use cases that we have is generally we have a lot of Excel sheets with people that we have met, and we want to follow up with them, and then we'll have to create emails for them, and we want to see we want to reach out to them in as personalized a way as we can, right? So here is like an Excel sheet that I have of like some people, which like fictional people. So it's like, this is their names, this is their email ID, this is where I met them, this is the product they were interested in, and we discussed that we want to tentatively meet them on a particular day, and I want to create emails for them. So what I've done is it just takes those names. I have a very simple prompt. It's like, based on the provided customer name, where I met them, product customer is interested in, and when we decided to meet, you will write an email requesting for a meeting so I can send the web invite. Keep the mail short and to the point, sign the email with my details, and I provided my details to it. And then when I run this email, it basically goes to that particular Excel sheet gets all the input, creates these prompts, basically like all with all the relevant information, and it keeps populating here. And I can just review them here, give you this task to somebody else, or review them and send it myself. Or what I can do is, if I have any brand guidelines for my company, or if I have templates, I can provide them also as input, so that these mails are in a particular format that is approved by my company, right? And the thing is, the use cases are huge for this, and this is like a task which is like basically busy work, and I'm just freed up from it, and I just have to like curate and make sure that these emails are what we want to say, rather than spend time writing these emails. And these are highly contextual, if we see, right? Dear Michael, I hope this email finds you well, blah, 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 right? I want to follow up with our conversation that you express interest in product C. I believe it's a perfect fit for your requirement and can provide significant value to your business. To discuss product C in more details. So it's like it has all the relevant inputs, and it's like whether you have met them in a conference, over a phone, through a reference, it factors all of those things in and produces an email that is quite relevant. So this is broadly what I had in mind to discuss today. If there are any questions, we can take them. Or if you want to have access, is it generating more content than what was provided in Excel? Yes. So to answer your question, so previously, basically, if you would have seen, this column was empty, and we only had the enough data on the first 5 columns, and it can generate text for us right in the Google Sheet. I can generate it again for you, so it can happen on the fly.
No, I think I was trying to understand if the code that you'd provide had like a lot of the text and it's only plugging in from here, or is it also adding more context than what you've provided in the code?
So what it does is, so I created a prompt for it. So let me see, where is it? Email generator, right? So it creates a prompt on the fly based on the guidance that it have given. The base prompt is pretty simple, that this is what it is supposed to do, but obviously it also needs input. So I'm creating input on the fly based on the data that I'm getting from Excel sheet. And then I make a call to ChatGPT with the relevant thing, right? So it's like I have built a system. So system is what this is talking about. And the input that I'm providing comes from here, where it populates customer name, where did I meet them? In like basically, at the end of this, it is a human readable format. And I think I can show it here. So for example, what it does is customer name, this thing, right? So it creates this on the fly and sends it along with the prompt I have created. So it's like one of the biggest complaints people had with ChatGPT is cannot do current data. So basically using APIs, that is possible. If you have your own knowledge system in your company, you can just plug it with that with a few lines of code, right? It is not like very complicated code. I'm not a programmer myself. I just have some basic experience in how to code things, and I'm able to create like 100 lines of code, and that just gets the work done. Another thing I would say is I'll put the link for the download file. So I would really appreciate if you can give me some feedback on how the webinar went and whether you learned something new or what you would like to see more in the future.